Hello, everyone. Welcome to our episode today on Is Attribution Really Dead? My name is Eddie Casado, or Eddie Casado, and I am the head of growth marketing at Mouseflow, and joined by a good friend. We've become pen pals too, like with Deepak before on our latest episode over LinkedIn and collaborating a lot and just establishing a really good connection. Adam Holmgren is with
Yep.
us today, and he's the co-founder of Fibbler, an LinkedIn attribution tool. I'll let him do the honors, but Adam, thank you so much for joining. It's great to meet you face to face for the first time, actually. Welcome to this little space where we're going to talk about all things attribution.
Yeah, it's crazy actually that this is the first time we're meeting face to face, so to say, which is kind of the wonderful thing about the platform of LinkedIn, right? You meet so many people that you almost consider friends, right, without even meeting
Yeah,
face to face, which is really cool. Yeah, happy to
exactly.
be here. Fun.
Awesome, Adam. So listen, I mentioned Fibbler shortly, and I think that for maybe a lot of people don't know what you guys do. I
Yeah.
wonder if you could, since we're starting to get a few people into the webinar, we can start with a little light intro to warm up and tell us a little bit about Fibbler and what you guys are doing right now.
Yeah. Before that, I can just briefly explain about myself. I've been working in the tech SaaS space for about a decade now, 10 years. And during this time, my passion, I think, lies in, the startup scene, entrepreneurships. I have started a lot of things. And now the latest venture is, of course, Fibbler, which I'm hoping will turn into, one of the greatest as well. Before that, I started a European demand gen community and podcast as well, because I saw that was kind of lacking. I actually created a small Chrome extension also and started selling that. So I've tried to do a few things, but now we are here with Fibbler, and Fibbler is basically why I'm here today, I guess, because we saw a kind of a hole in the market and tried to do something about it. And I've been working with LinkedIn ads specifically for the last 3 years or so, deep down, thousands of hours. And some things within that platform is really tricky. It's wonderful in many ways, but there are also
Yeah,
many tricky things with it. And one of the tricky things is, taking your efforts there and actually tying it to revenue or tying it to some sort of pipeline. Because often what you optimize for is clicks. And most people don't click on ads. I think the average click-through rate is like 0.5% or something like that, right? So what we did with Fibbler was, looking at impressions instead. So the people that actually see your ads and get affected by them, how does that correlate with pipeline and with revenue? Because most people don't click an ad and come into your site and fill out a form and go through a demo. Most people go through this super complex buying journey these days, right? And that is kind of the place we're trying to help now.
that's great, Adam. And you touch up on a few things that we're going to dive into throughout the course of the episode. I'm just going to do a light intro myself as well. For those that don't know me, as I mentioned, I'm Eddie Casado. I'm the head of growth marketing at Mouseflow, and we are a behavioral analytics tool that essentially shows you the why and gives you the context behind the traditional analytics numbers. So, and we do this via session replay, heat maps, journeys, and automatic friction detection, among other things. So that is, and some of you may be asking, what is the connection between the two? I myself, as a performance marketer, I am in charge of of the company's LinkedIn campaigns, as well as the rest of the marketing mix that is paid. So I am essentially the paid manager. And I came across an issue a few months ago in which most of our data went the other way. All of our attribution data was starting to see differently. Our effectiveness in campaigns decreased by 50, 60%. And we actually were pretty hit in a negative, we had a negative impact from consent mode V2 from Google and all the changes in privacy and all these considerations. Sooner thereafter, I reached out to my LinkedIn network and I was introduced to Adam and what he was doing. It was back then in beta. And ever since then, we have been in constant touch about, Fibbler, how to make it better, helping where I can, and also taking advantage of the tool that to me answers one of the most critical questions that we have today. And let's start with the program with this. Adam, is attribution in B2B SaaS dead?
Yeah, it's a good title, right? To get people here. I think one form of attribution definitely is dead, but I think there's ways we definitely need attribution. In its essence, attribution is about tying our marketing efforts to revenue, right? That's what it is about, and that used to be a lot easier. It is easy for certain channels. It is easy for Google Ads, as an example, where you can relatively easy or easier, we can say. Where you have a commercial term, like where someone is actually expressing an intent, booking a demo, it's easier to tie that to revenue. Other channels such as LinkedIn, such as all different kinds of advertising channels, it's impossible to do that. Partly because the sales cycles, the buying journeys, they are so complex. I mean, dependent on your ACV of the product you're selling, they can be a year longer. So how could you possibly measure attribution through first touch or last touch? I don't know the percentage, I read it somewhere, but the amount of companies that measure their attribution through first touch or last touch, it's staggering. It's super high, which is also a very short-term way to measure it, right? If you measure it by first touch, it will most definitely never be LinkedIn ads, right? As an example. Last touch, same thing, right? It will be your Google ads probably.
Potentially.
But potentially. So I think the form of attribution where we only believe in this direct attribution and trying to find that is definitely dead. We need to find other ways to do it. One way to think about it, which is kind of where I started Fibbler, I was thinking about, okay, how does different touch points influence the buying journey, right? We have 1,000 different touch points along the sales cycle, and how do they influence the buying journey? And I dug down into focusing specifically on LinkedIn ads. This is equally true, and there's a bunch of different attribution software that does this for the entire tech stack. Which I think is really cool, looking at the customer journey based on touch points and not so much about what made the actual conversion happen, right?
Yeah. And I think one of the for me, I mean, for me, it's not that it's really dead, but it's transformed and we don't recognize how it transformed. I think that attribution still plays a large influence in how operations should be run. But at the end of the day, I think it's about, like you said, influence. How are we influencing deals? How are we, with our marketing efforts, with our campaigns, influencing the pipeline? And that influence is what needs to be measured now. Obviously, when you get to talk to a CEO, CMO, or RevOps, you want to have an absolute number. That's always been the quest, right? I started doing, measurement and attribution, I would say 10 years ago. And it was always, but we need an absolute number and we need one source of truth. And we always had those discussions. And back then it was B2C. And, recently I started B2B with Mousewell 4.5 years ago. And I see how it's transformed from, you can actually attribute this directly to, okay, now the buyer journey is more complex and you don't necessarily measure all of this. It's like, I go back to the old days of traditional marketing where you would say, okay, I'm going to buy that banner in the middle of the highway and that's going to get X amount of impressions, X amount of eyeballs, and this is how we measured it. But you never got the actual number, right? And you have to somehow attribute the influence of the whole marketing ecosystem to the success of the campaign. So I think inevitably we're going back to that very uncomfortable place that performance marketers find themselves in which I cannot tell you with 100% certainty if this ad converted or if it influenced the whole deal. And that was the way that marketing was done before, right? I mean, you didn't have computers at some point. Mad Men didn't have computers, all these things. But the value of marketing was felt. It was something that was not under discussion. So right now, because of the advent of technology, it's made it a little bit harder. And now with privacy, my take is that it's not that it's really dead. We're just going back to this uncomfortable place of not really having a grip on whether something is working or directly influencing. And I want to mention something else, Adam, as well, to see what your thoughts are. That you mentioned that when we're on LinkedIn, we're optimizing for clicks. Yet LinkedIn has become this monster in terms of ads. That having a good CTR doesn't always mean that you have a healthy campaign anymore. This last year, I think I launched like 1,000 ads or something like that. And I've seen campaigns in which I am tripling and quadrupling benchmarks, but still people are not getting to the website when they get to the decision stage, or if I run a website traffic ad. And that's why I think the beauty of this transformation is understanding marketing beyond first click and last click. It's understanding how we impact the business, not just having a profitable ROI positive campaign. So I don't know if have you seen that in your campaigns as a demand gen manager as well, that, hey, my campaigns are working great. And then all of a sudden, like, okay, but you're not driving any traffic, or just like nobody's doing anything out of it.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. We see the amount of SaaS companies that exists also, that is rising. Obviously, the amount of advertising is rising. And I think it's important. Like, I've been thinking about this. Like, no one comes to LinkedIn to watch and click an ad, right? No one is coming there to do that, which is, I have shifted my entire LinkedIn ad strategy towards only thought leadership ads, meaning only sponsoring. If I take Fibbler as an example, the only thing I do is sponsoring my own posts, right? Because
they're value driven, right? You're giving something away for free, and that's how you develop that friendship, that relationship with the prospect. 3 months in, 4 months in, when they get that need, I think I'm trying to do the same thing as well.
Yeah,
and I think that's what's working across the board.
Yeah, I think so too. And like, most companies don't do that. And I think what's easier for me now at Fibbler, I'm focusing on this one channel. I will obviously see if it's working, because it will impact everything. If you are a company, where you are spending 20K or above a month on LinkedIn ads, of course, it's hard to shift your entire strategy to thought leadership ads. It also requires that you have people or customers or prospects that are willing to talk about what you do and your problems. So I think
leaders that have thoughts, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's critical, right? But there are so many organizations that have leaders who have thoughts, definitely, because they've built a product, but not necessarily public thoughts, right? But I really believe thought leadership ads and the importance that they are starting to get, that will only increase.
Right.
People will realize that.
And it's like, I call it the new wave influencer, right, in the B2B space. And I think we were due to get them at some point. Thankfully, we can actually know the report of the person that is actually putting those thoughts out there. But now that we're talking about ads, right, and you mentioned the journey as well, and that's one of the points that I wanted to touch up on. We're talking about that you've shifted your strategy to thought leader ads, and I wonder, the customer journey being so complicated on B2B SaaS, right?
Yeah.
Where do you see thought leader ads in that journey? Are those your awareness? How do you define your customer journey, considering what you're doing today?
Yeah, I would say that I've kind of shifted away from even trying to do that. I do it a little bit when I create content, of course. Is this more value driven, or is it more product driven? That's kind of my distinction that I make. But when I actually set up LinkedIn ads, if it's a cold layer or if it's the retargeting layer, I'm starting to kind of just do that because of having the different audiences, so to say. I'm trying to keep the content very similar regardless of, because I don't know at what stage they are at, right? It's very so I'm trying to not force that, but have every type of content in there. And I think that's the good thing about thought leadership ads is that you can kind of go from awareness down the funnel a little bit in one single post compared to like an ad, which is very, either it's top funnel, it's bottom, it's not the same really. So I'm experiencing that to be easier now, actually. But yeah, I'm trying to not make the distinction because I don't know, and I don't think we do.
Right. And I agree. I think that mapping it out is one of those challenges, and one of those things that you have to tick off on a checklist on every SaaS is, know the customer journey, whether you're in product, whether you're in marketing, is knowing the customer journey. And obviously there are tons of materials out there. I don't think we have to spend time explaining this. However, I think that there are some characteristics that we have to define and share with the audience today about the makeup. Like if you're new to this, if you're starting a B2B, or even if you're a seasoned professional in B2B, the reality of it is that the buying process is different from a B2C, right? It's just, in e-commerce would, be profitable by just running TikTok ads and Meta ads. But if they turn to LinkedIn, they will utterly fail unless they are promoting a product that is somewhat in tune with an audience, right? I'm talking about, slippers and shoes. That's not something that you would sell normally on LinkedIn. I don't think you can, but happy to be surprised at this point. But in the decision-making process, especially for you as a SaaS co-founder, I think that we have to set some of the limitations, right, on who's actually, in my case, for example, I was the influencer, the champion, and the end user for Fibbler towards my decision makers, right? But I think it's important for you. How has that process been of discovery of how to identify these things? Walk us through a little, because you've been very open about the process of Fibbler, right, and growing Fibbler. But I wonder if you can share a little bit more about, you don't map, you're shying away from mapping the customer journey, but at the end of the day, are you still looking at personas, or you're still looking at, okay, this is the person I should be doing outreach to or writing for, or how is that process coming along?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. I can try to take you through the playbook, so to say, that I'm trying to develop for myself. It all started out with me just organically posting stuff, right? That was where it started, seeing what actually drove engagement. And I think Fibbler would not have been as successful if I hadn't posted for 3 years before it started, because now I have a target audience. I have an audience already of, I don't know, 18,000 people in my network who is mostly working with demand gen, with growth, with B2B marketing in some regard. So what's working there tends to work well towards my audience. But yes, early on, I tried to define my ICP, definitely. And it's very tricky because there are a lot of roles that kind of does these things. You can be demand gen, you can be growth marketing, you can be performance, you can be a head of marketing at a smaller startup. So it was hard to define titles, right? But I did define, I'm targeting the SMB segment. I would say 250 employees down to, one person. So I'm having that smaller segment with a bit more transactional nature. It's either SaaS companies in one end and agencies in the other end. So that's kind of the distinction I made. I'm using a tool called Vine, which has been great to kind of segment this and kind of push it straight into HubSpot, which has been good for me. And then of course, from that, I push it into LinkedIn ads and I layer these titles on top. And the way I actually, defined ICP in terms of titles eventually was the first, say, 30 customers to Fibbler. What are these people talking to them, and then it kind of made sense. They came from similar backgrounds as yourself, which is obviously my ICP now. So that was kind of where I started building out my LinkedIn ads. And usually you read, right, you should not start LinkedIn ads or paid ads as your first marketing tactic. And it's definitely my first marketing tactic. So maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think it depends largely on the product, right? And I don't know, that saying has been going around for so many years that I just think that the platform has evolved enough in order for it to become a place for people to actually invest and get to their ICP and get their message across. So, everything that we say today, that we're saying now, everything that somebody has said before, you have to take it with a grain of salt, and you have to do your own. Use that as context, as benchmarks, but do yourself a favor and try yourself some things, because if you keep following other people's footsteps, you're not innovating. And at least I'm in the side of innovation. But listen, Adam, I think we can keep talking so much about defining the ICPs and whatnot, but I want to bring it back to the attribution conversation, because I think that's what people are yearning to learn from here. So the reason why we were talking about this ICPs, to kind of recap it and to understand the customer journey, is to understand the complexity of it all. That an attribution tool is only meant, there's no one thing, we're not selling on one channel, we're selling on multiple channels. Each of their own channels have their own measurement, have their own ways of measuring things, attribution windows, attribution methods, et cetera, and they all play a part together in the journey.
Yeah.
What is important is that there are tools out there that would actually merge all of this information. One of them, Dream Data and Hockey Stack, I believe, which are in the same space, but on the mid-market and enterprise tier, that would tell you exactly what's going on with all this data and then map it out with all the touch points. But in the case of Fibbler, we're only focusing on LinkedIn because it's so expensive and it's so tricky to get a single conversion out of it. So that's the reason why we were talking about ICPs and customer journeys, just to give you an idea of how complex this is. But now if we jump into some of the other issues that have made people think that attribution is something that it's unattainable and unrealistic to attain, is data integration and quality issues. So in your experience, how have you approached this challenges? You have so many siloed data platforms, channels, and you have quality issues, right? Because we're always, again, we're still trying to get comfortable with that singular source of truth, so that we can actually go to our bosses and say, hey, this is what we do, this is what we get out of. But that's becoming murky and murky every day. Yeah. So how are you managing data integrations and quality issues when it comes to attribution?
And I think the issue often is that we measure all of this in its own platforms. As to say, when we look at results from Google Ads, we look in Google Ads. When we do it for LinkedIn Ads, we do it in LinkedIn Ads. And apart from that, we have our CRM, right? Most marketers use either HubSpot or Salesforce as our single source of truth, but we don't really have everything in there. And yes, as you said, there are certain attribution tools, Dream Data, Hockey Stack. They kind of tie everything together and help with that, but they're also expensive, right? What you can do, there are a bunch of tools that does similar things like this, that only works with integrating data, is to try on your own to get the data into your CRM, right? Because that's where you can create a single source of truth, not to like say this source made it happen, but more to visualize the touch points. So yes, we help with LinkedIn Ads, trying to get that into the HubSpot, but there are a bunch of other tools that help with other channels as well. So I think that's something I've learned over the last few months, is like a CRM can get extremely powerful if you allow it to become that. But you have to kind of supply the data for it to become that. And the tricky part often can be, it's easier with LinkedIn Ads because you can kind of identify the company, match it towards the company in HubSpot. From other channels, it's harder sometimes to.
Yeah, you're just getting one side of the picture.
Exactly, and that is still a problem. I think it's not solved yet.
I don't think it is. I think there are. I'm not gonna say half measures, but I think there are measures that can get you close, and I think that's key as well for everybody that's tuning in. I think attribution is not about getting the absolute number. It's getting as close as you can to whatever tool you're using for revenue. And again, measuring influence. I see a question pop up from Tisha. Tisha, welcome. Without sound attribution, how does one understand what channels are best for customer acquisition to optimize marketing expense? So I think that's part of where we're trying to get at, and it's something that I've also experienced myself, Tisha, is that it's becoming harder to actually say, okay, this is how we're going to optimize. I was, blessed, I would say, that I know my account for the past 4.5 years, and I knew the conversion rates, and I could see the numbers going from one channel to another. But obviously, it's becoming harder to do budget allocation now that marketing spend is now that attribution is what it is. But maybe, Adam, can you maybe add some color as to how would you approach budgeting today if you're having these attribution issues like I did months ago?
No, it's also funny, right? If we look back just a few years,
tragically so, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the gold rush of SaaS, right? When every SaaS company was performing well, no one was questioning attribution, right? And that's still true. Like, if the numbers are going up, no one will ever question your where stuff are coming from. But when the number starts to go down, the execs want to know what the fuck is happening, right? And I think that's the exactly. And I mean, in terms of understanding channels, I think the easiest way, and this is also hard if you are already a very established and larger company, right, is to go back to basics and not scale a bunch of channels at the same time, because then it will be super hard to know what works. So focus on one channel for a longer period of time and really try to nail that channel. Then you will see if that channel is actually performing on your total revenue numbers,
exactly
numbers.
How that channel influences the rest of the channels. Like in our case, for example, is direct traffic. Some of our Google Ads campaigns are strong in some countries where the privacy settings are strong. So we see the numbers of direct being directly influenced from our paid campaigns in Google search. So I think it's key what you mentioned, Adam, that depending on your situation, Tisha, is maybe, and we're going to get into buy-in because this is a company issue. When you need to do these things and you actually have to go to your boss and say, like, hey, listen, I really cannot get closer to the number that we had before everything went sideways.
Yeah, exactly.
We know that we're still bringing this, we know we're still growing because we see the numbers growing, aka signups, demo bookings, revenue is still growing at a considerable rate. What's missing is just that I cannot tell you from what campaign it came from, but the users are still coming from there. And for example, I didn't mean to do the plug here, but do you know how I noticed this was happening? And I got the evidence to showcase this to my CMO is I got all my traffic from my paid campaigns tag with UTMs, obviously from Google Ads. The moment they land on MouseFlow, they either accept cookies or they don't. And I can see how that UTM drops depending on the setting. This is consent mode V1, okay? I could see that the moment that we classified MouseFlow as something as a necessary cookie and then moved it as a marketing cookie, I could see how the UTM dropped the moment they went to the landing page to sign up. So right then and there, I knew that the issue was they weren't accepting all cookies. And at that moment, I knew that if all of the traffic that was coming in wasn't accepting all cookies, I wasn't going to get the attribution from the UTM, and HubSpot wasn't going to be reporting what it was reporting before. So, I tagged the buttons for allow cookies, for reject cookies, for customize on MouseFlow, and I got all of this data. to understand what is the behavior. And it turns out that a lot of people are rejecting cookies because of the markets that we're playing in. So this is just to say that there are still means to understand what the influence is, but it is hard. And we're going to get into that topic now. How does Atisha, let's say, get buy-in from her? I don't know, Atisha, pardon me, maybe you are the CMO, but let's say you're not, from your boss. And how does she get buy-in to tell, the powers that be, like, hey, listen, attribution is what it is. It's a different ballgame now. I need to scale down my campaigns to understand what the influence is if you don't have any historical data. So, yeah. Adam, to put you on the spot, how would you go about having this conversation, considering that, it's not easy to say, I'm just going to shut off some channels, because the same way you don't know how it's influencing, it could be positive or negative. And if you shut something off, you could be jeopardizing the company. How do you navigate those waters? How would you actually go through that?
Yeah, it's tough, right? It's all about building trust internally, right? But I think it's fun that you mentioned it. This experiment of shutting down channels is something I have. We've been doing that quite a lot at GetAccept, where I work now. What happens to our direct traffic, to our branded traffic, if we shut down Google Ads completely? That was kind of what I wanted to know. And as you said, that could be, really tough for the entire business if it makes, the wrong things. So what we did to do that, we selected one market, one of our target markets where we're present. We decided to turn that off to see what the effects were. And then we went to another market. So I feel like that is quite, if you have all of these channels already and you don't want to start over from scratch with one, which I bet you don't. I think that's it's a good angle to try this channel. What happens if we remove Google Ads in Germany for 3 months, 6 months? What happens if we do the same for LinkedIn ads in the UK? I think that's also solid, because I think in terms of budgeting and getting the execs on board, you need to have proof for things, right? You need to show that, okay, we tried this for 6 months and this was the results.
Yeah, I think that's a good play. I see Atisha has a follow-up, and Alan Thomas also with a question. Let's go to Atisha first. What is the role of experimentation? Wouldn't that give an idea about which channels is driving numbers by how much? Let me say that, yes, obviously, if you're experimenting multiple channels, but attribution being what it is, if you experiment on multiple channels, it's going to be harder for you to identify which one is influencing what. There's, depending on the size of the business, there's one trick you could do is how many people you're driving to a landing page that is unique, that, for the campaign, right? And that way you can measure how many visits you get and how many conversions come out of that landing page, whether they accept cookies or not. But I think that what the experimentation that we are proposing is exactly that you actually see your markets and then shut off some channels to see how those numbers influence and how those numbers dance in terms of, like, for example, if I shut off my Google Ads on Germany, and being our attribution landscape what it is today, I will see a drop in direct traffic acquisition. So I know that whilst I cannot measure it to the T, I know that my Google Ads is influencing direct traffic in a positive way. So I think that's the role of experimentation that you're suggesting, Atisha, is to experiment with the channels little by little, one at a time, to understand how they influence if you don't have any historical data. Now, if you have historical data, obviously go back and look at those numbers prior to July or maybe a year ago, and then look at what the conversion was back then and look at what the influence was back then and what the marketing mix was and your budgets. I think that's the good way to approach it. Adam, I don't know if you have anything to add for Atisha here.
No, but I agree. But I think isn't the issue with all of us marketers, myself, I'm very I've done this multiple times, right? We're always trying to find a golden nugget, right? This is what's going to drive the growth for us, which is the sole reason why we scale to so many channels, because we want to find the one channel that will rule them all. And most cases, that's never the case, right?
We focus so much on the tree that we neglect to see the forest,
exactly.
right? So, and then all of a sudden, oh, this channel's not working. I'm going to shut it off. And then all of a sudden, 6 months in, what happened? We don't remember.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of the game that we're in today. And that's what I'm trying to deliver to the audience is that you're not alone. We're all suffering through this. 2, it's changing. The landscape in terms of attribution is transforming into something more similar to what it was in the old marketing days, in which you couldn't actually measure anything. It was influence, what you could measure. Influence of the marketing activities over pipeline and over revenue. That's where we're getting to. So I hope that satisfies your question, Atisha. I'm going to move on to Alan's question. He's interested in hearing our thoughts on how modern buying journey trends, for example, more in-depth research, less outreach to salespeople, impacts attribution, especially if what prompted the conversion is unmeasurable. For example, reading a user review on Capterra or similar. I'm going to be honest. Let me read it again because I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding it. Give me 1 second here. This is a curveball, Alan. So, okay, awkward silence. You mean less outreach from salespeople or to salespeople? Because I think that part of the attribution is not meant to measure it. I don't think it will ever get to measure all of the activities. It goes back to the conversation that Adam and I were having about having that single source of truth as close as you can with as much data as you can. And this is not something that is going to happen overnight. It's something that companies like Mousel, like ourselves, we're still evolving through the changes in technology. Adam, I don't know if you understand, if you have a better answer than mine, because mine was super vague.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think it's interesting. I think what you're talking about also, Alan, is like most people, they have done 70% of the research or something like that before they book a demo, right? They have already done this in-depth research, and usually that means they've asked their friends, they've asked in communities, they've, as your example, they've checked G2 or Capterra before they even, enter your site. And yes, it's going to it's going to affect attribution, because they are going to end up on your site through either a branded search or direct traffic. So they've read all this stuff about you, but the conversion point will be something unmeasurable. So I think you're spot on there. It's going to increase. It's going to make attribution even worse in that sense.
Yeah, no, but it's important that if you're in SaaS, for example, G2, Capterra, and this marketplaces of review sites, they are part of the journey for most SaaS, absolutely. And they are unmeasurable, like you suggested, but they will play a large role, a big role, in convincing people to engage with you, especially how you respond to them when they review you. That hits close to home, because I've been managing the review program for Mousel for 4.5 years, and it's been one of those things that we know has an impact, and you can actually measure through my G2. You can measure if they get to know you first from G2 or from your website, and what the relationship between those visits are. So it does play a big role. I see.
And I mean, this is also the reason why G2 are selling intent data, right? They see the value in this, and they can sell that stuff now. They can sell you the data of what companies are looking at your profile, reading your reviews, and so on. So I mean, it's getting commercialized.
Exactly, and it helps. It does help, especially when you're running demand gen. If you're running account-based marketing, all of those intent signals are useful, but it does require a village to get it to work. So I think Alan is trying to rephrase. I think I'm getting at the buying intent signals is becoming fewer and further between. I would actually say that intent signals are becoming more ubiquitous. Like most software companies, G2, Capterra, have intent signals that can sell you and that can benefit some of this attribution calculation that we're trying to get at, so that we can reel it back to the conversation. I have another question here, and I'm so happy to see so many people actually interacting with us. It's a hot topic, definitely. I was not alone. I'm happy to see that was the case. I don't have a name here, but may have been answered earlier. But is the main method of attribution via UTMs, or are there other ways and methods? Adam, you want to take this one?
Yeah, but naturally, when we talk about first touch, last touch, yes, UTMs is the way to measure that. But what we're talking about here today, influenced pipeline, influenced revenue, companies that you have influenced, that's not necessarily UTMs in the same way. What we built with Fibbler as an example is we're tying LinkedIn ads data with your CRM data, so it has nothing to do with UTMs, specifically. It's more, we can tie this company to the same company and so on. But yes, I think 99% of the attribution is UTMs, definitely. Which is also a bit of the problem, right? Because say that as you talked about before, Eddie, about people not accepting cookies. Like, I don't have any numbers on a benchmark for how many people do that, but it's a big portion of people these days that don't do it at all, and then it's impossible to know, right? And it's a big
no, it's definitely a good question, and no worries, Alan. I hope we did justice by you answering the question. We had a little bit of trouble getting there, but I'm glad that we did. So yes, there are other means of measuring, obviously, attribution. There are companies that we've mentioned before that you can install the script on your website, and they help you kind of pave the way or map out the journey. But they still require permissions. So they're still, we're going to talk briefly on cookieless tracking in a minute, because we have 15 more minutes of Adam on this. And I'm happy that we've digressed and answered all these questions. But yes, there are other ways and methods. I remember back in the day, 5 years ago, there was a company called LeadsRx, which was actually trying to measure attribution outside of just UTM tracking. It was acquired by Onbounds, if I remember correctly. Shout out to Larry Todd, big friend. And so yeah, there are other methods. You just have to look through their platforms for attribution, similar to what you would find in mobile marketing, AppsFlyer, just you name it. There are platforms for web attribution as well that can help with doing tracking of attribution outside UTMs. Atisha, I see that you've messaged me. I have the post open, but I will get back to you on experimentation when it comes to attribution privately, and then share it with the audience later. I just want to move along here with our rundown. So we discussed organizational alignment and buy-in. So you have this issue. Thankfully, in my case, my CMO and myself were in the same boat. We needed to just get together, align. How are we going to measure things now? What is the reality that we're living in? And then transmitting that information to the board and to the CEO, saying like, listen, this is new. This is how the game is played now, and we're doing as best as we can to get as close to it. But you also have to give yourself some margin and understand that you're not the only one that is facing this issue, and there are people that are actually stop investing money on Google Ads just because of consent mode B2. So this is the new reality, and we have to shift from going from this last click, first click attribution model to influencing the pipeline, which is what we're trying to accomplish today. So we have 15 more minutes together, Adam. Is it in your demand gen capacity? How did you manage the sales and marketing tangle? This is coming up from our recent webinar this week as well. How did you, like right now, I know Fibbler is a small team, but how do you see Fibbler fitting into the sales and marketing relationship and dynamic for converting more deals?
I think not only for Fibbler, to be honest, but I see such a rise, and we've already talked about intent data a little bit, right? But about the signal-based outbound, if you call it that, like, and I think a lot of companies are jumping on this train, and it's a good glue between sales and marketing, right? Because how can we at marketing create signals that sales can act on? And because that has been a struggle in the past, right? And we're focusing with Fibbler on LinkedIn ads, obviously. So how can we create signals for when a company has engaged with your ads this many amount of times for sales to act on, right? And same with other channels. So I think that's extremely, we have this B2B, the company in the US that are identifying person level data on your website, right? Huge signal that they obviously send to the sales team. So I think there's a lot of companies building on this signal-led outbound thing, because there's still a lot of companies doing outbound. That will not shift anytime soon. But if you can do it based on something rather than completely cold, it's a big thing, right? And I think they will be happier at marketing because of it.
Well, I mean, I think everybody will be happier if outreach got a little bit smarter and away from, cold calling 2.0, predictable revenue kind of model. I think that we've, let's say we've exhausted that framework enough, especially now on digital. But yeah, absolutely. I think outreach is not something that is going to disappear, nor it's going to be overtaken by AI. I think the more human the outreach and the more information the SDR or the salesperson has to make a good connection and a relevant message, the more effective it will be. I certainly hope so, because I am in a quest against that outreach overall, because it's ridiculous. I mean,
if a sales rep can go into an account in their CRM, HubSpot or Salesforce, and they can see that, okay, this company have engaged with our category on G2, they have engaged with our LinkedIn ads 50 times over the last, I don't know, and certain other intent signals, that would be a great time to reach out, right?
Yeah. And then you can add Sales Navigator to that list as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Comes to, then that has a good meat on it, in terms of ad activity as well. Not as in depth as you would find on Fibbler, but definitely good information there, and good way to keep track of your leads and your campaign. So I think that, unfortunately, we're all looking for that one tool that does it all. Unfortunately, I think you have to come up with your own kind of playbook, like you mentioned before, and say, okay, this is my stack, and this is what I am using, and this is how I am getting the information, and how I'm going to make this attribution thing work for me and not against me. So it is time. It is a time of adjustment and evolution. I think it's here to stay. Although I've read that I may be mistaken. Call me out on it if I am. That Google is actually, kind of going back on their third-party cookies thing. Now they're changing the privacy sandbox somewhat, and I think that it's too huge of a business to make such a big pivot like they did. I certainly hope so. I miss the old days. I am a PPC guy through and through. I can't deal with more algorithms and things doing things for me. I'd rather calculate my thing myself. So 10 more minutes. And I don't know if this is a topic that you want to get into, Adam, and feel free to just tell me. I am not the person to talk about this, because I'm certainly not. So I'm willing to learn from you. But the cookieless landscape is also, it's at the root of the cause of the attribution issues, outside of privacy issues in certain countries and states.
Yeah.
How do you see this affecting us further in B2B and SaaS marketing and attribution?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, as you said, the Chrome was about to remove that, right? But obviously they went went back on it somehow. So we'll see. But I've actually seen it as like when I started Fibbler now, I made it my mission that I didn't want to track anyone on my website initially. And after a while, I went back on that and started using cookies anyways, because I saw
that's the way the cookie crumbles. So.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to do stuff with it. But yeah, I mean, it's only going to get worse, I think, right? It all depends on what happens when you click a cookie, right? And I mean, there's so many websites out there that are not even using this correctly, right? Even if you press accept or decline, they're gonna run their freaking scripts anyways. It doesn't matter. I bet if you go and check 10 websites out there, 5 of them will be like that. They will run the scripts no matter what. So I still think it's a bigger issue than just having a cookie banner and having people accept it, which is part of the problem, right? Which it creates skepticism. It creates people breaking of trust if people track you continuously anyways. You know, if we talk about this, I think everyone has done this, right? Being close to your phone, talked about something, and the next thing you do, you see an ad about it, which is always spooky. But things like that happen, and you don't really know how to deal with it. So I think
I can swear that I had one time I was thinking about a cologne, and I got an ad for that cologne. And I promise you that I did not write it to anybody. I did not say it to anybody. I was actually on the metro here in Madrid. I didn't have any signal. I was thinking about, oh, maybe I should get this cologne. And then as soon as I stepped off the metro, I got an ad for a cologne. So that must have been the best targeting I've seen in my life. Mind reading targeting is that I think that's in beta 30 years from now, but it's ridiculous.
Did you buy it? Is the big question.
I didn't. I didn't buy it. I did not buy it. No, it's I've been meaning to buy it for ages. I never get around to it. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I think that, from my perspective, it is a new reality. Like I said before, the big companies, the big tech companies, are most likely going to be the ones that set the pace for this, and also governments as well, and laws. I think it's going to be. I foresee this being a bigger issue that is going to be battled between the tech giants and governments, just because of now, data is the ultimate weapon. Demographic data is the ultimate weapon. And I don't say that lightly. So I think it's going to get worse, but I hope that innovation and the Steve Jobs, Elon Musk's, and the Zuckerbergs of the world will get together at some point, or somebody somewhere in a garage is already working on something like you did for Fibbler, and innovate and put something together that is going to help us marketers actually get closer to what we knew before. But I am more on the side of, hey, it's time for a change. Maybe it's time to change our mindset, to also evolve as marketers, and to see things a little bit more broader, especially if you're in performance marketing. So I think that's my message. I don't know anything about cookieless and this technology, so I am not willing to get that deep, because I will say something stupid for sure. But tons of articles out there, tons of means to also track as well in a cookieless environment, like server-side tracking and whatnot. So there are alternatives. You just have to look through them and get somebody to help you understand these things. As a marketer, I had to get help from one of our partners to actually set this up and have as many signals as I can to get as closer as I could to what I had before. I think that's the game. But there is a cultural shift in my company, led by myself and the CMO, to start measuring deals and marketing's efforts influence in the deals that we make. So I think I want to close the webinar today by thanking you, Adam. You have an amazing product. You already know this. I wish you all the best. I wish you keep growing. And if you don't know Fibbler, please go to fibbler.co and check it out. Start a trial. It's easy to set up. It's easy to connect, and you're going to start seeing some really interesting things on the platform for sure that you cannot see on LinkedIn Ads UI. Adam, any thoughts before we part?
Yeah, no, great discussions in general. I also think as you, like, the future is going to be about visualizing the customer journey, right? And then taking data informed decisions from that. I think that's key. I think we're coming from a very data driven era where we as performance marketeers have taking very strict decisions based on data. And now I think we're turning more into, being data informed and then taking decision based on that and our minds, right?
That is it. That is it for today, Adam. Well put. Thanks again for joining this episode on Is SaaS Attribution B2B SaaS Dead? It doesn't look dead. It doesn't feel dead. It's just transforming a little bit. So that is the parting ways. I want to thank everybody for joining and for the great questions. And I hope to see you guys on our next episode of our series on attribution, sales, or any other topic that is out there and it's currently making waves. Signing up now, Eddie from Mouseflow. Adam, thanks a lot, man. Take care.